You thought you knew Patrick Swayze, the heartthrob, the dancer who glided across the floor in Dirty Dancing, the soulful lover in Ghost, and the face that lit up screens with effortless charm. But the man behind those iconic roles carried a story that Hollywood never scripted, one of endurance, pain, and a relentless spirit that refused to surrender. This isn't the version you saw in interviews or red carpets. This is the chapter he never wrote for the cameras. When the world saw a star, he was quietly navigating a battle far more brutal than any villain or on-screen heartbreak. And in the final hours of his life, Patrick didn't just face the darkness. He stared it down with a grit that still leaves people speechless. Before the diagnosis, before whispers of his health ever reached the press, Patrick was living the kind of life that felt touched by destiny. He wasn't born into Hollywood royalty. He earned his place, one disciplined move at a time. Raised in Houston, Texas, by a cowboy father and a dance choreographer mother, Patrick was a unique blend of rugged resilience and artistic finesse. He didn't just walk into a room. He commanded it, without trying. In an industry obsessed with categories, he refused to fit one. Was he the sensitive dancer trained in classical ballet, or the all-American rebel with a southern drawl? He was both, and that's what made him unforgettable. His career exploded in 1987 with Dirty Dancing, a film that was never supposed to be a blockbuster. But when Patrick stepped into the role of Johnny Castle, something electric happened. Audiences were mesmerized. He wasn't just acting, he was igniting a cultural phenomenon. Pools everywhere turned into dance floors. Girls swooned, guys admired, and suddenly, a quiet Texan became an international icon. And then came Ghost, a performance that wasn't about looks or physicality, but raw emotional vulnerability. It proved he was more than a leading man. He was an actor with depth, someone who could break hearts with a look and rebuild them with a single line. But Patrick didn't chase the spotlight. He chased truth in every role. From adrenaline-pumping scenes in Point Break to the emotional gravity of City of Joy, he brought integrity to every frame. He trained like a warrior, did his own stunts, and worked harder than most around him. Hollywood glitz never softened him. Behind every polished appearance was the same disciplined dancer who respected the craft more than the fame it brought. And just when it seemed like nothing could slow him down, life hit harder than any script ever had. It began subtly, an ache in the stomach, an annoying pain that came and went. Nothing alarming for someone in his 50s, especially someone with a dancer's body worn by years of movement. Patrick brushed it off as stress or a pulled muscle, but the discomfort grew sharper, more relentless. Lisa, his wife and rock, pushed him to get checked. A few scans turned into a series of urgent tests. Then, the unthinkable. Stage 4 pancreatic adenocarcinoma. The kind of diagnosis that doesn't come with a long timeline or second chances. In most cases, it's already too late by the time symptoms show. And for Patrick, the cancer had already spread to his liver. The words from doctors were cold and clinical. There was no cure. No treatment plan with a happy ending. The median survival rate was just a handful of months. But Patrick didn't flinch. He listened, nodded, and then asked the question that would define the rest of his life. What are we going to do about it? That was the moment the real battle began. Not just for survival, but for dignity, for control, for one more chance to live on his own terms. Lisa never left his side. Together they searched for anything that could give them time. Days, weeks, moments. They found it in a clinical trial at Stanford. A new drug, vatilanib, was being tested to block tumor blood supply. It wasn't FDA approved, and results were far from guaranteed. But it was something. And something was all Patrick needed to give it everything he had. His fight wasn't loud or desperate. It was focused, disciplined. He approached treatment like he did a new dance routine, One step at a time, no shortcuts, no complaints. By spring of 2008, early scans brought unexpected news. The tumors hadn't grown. Some were even less active. It wasn't a miracle, but it was momentum. And with that, Patrick made a bold move. He signed on to star in The Beast, a gritty TV drama that would demand the kind of stamina most healthy actors struggled to maintain. Executives were nervous. Insurance companies questioned the risk. But Patrick didn't ask for special treatment. He memorized every line, refused body doubles, and worked grueling 14-hour days, 5 days a week. And when the weekend came, he checked into the hospital for chemotherapy. He didn't just show up. He dominated. Not to prove anything to the world, but to himself. To reclaim something that illness tried to steal. While most would have retreated, he pushed forward, believing that work itself was a kind of medicine. On set, he was sharp, focused, magnetic. Behind the scenes, he was exhausted, often sick, and in constant pain. But you'd never know it by the way he moved. That's the kind of performance no camera can capture. Each morning, Patrick rose before dawn, not because he felt strong, but because pretending to be was the only choice he gave himself. He sipped tea to calm the nausea, applied his own makeup when his hands could manage it, and walked onto set with a smile that defied everything going on inside him. When the pain became too much, he'd quietly step away, pull himself together, and return like nothing had happened. It wasn't just acting. It was defiance in its purest form. As the days stretched on, the disease continued to wear him down. His reflection slowly betrayed the toll: thinning hair, distant eyes, slower steps. Yet still, he rejected any hint of pity. When producers suggested easing his schedule, his response was firm. "I'll let you know when I can't do it anymore." That moment never came, because Patrick never gave it permission. And within that quiet rebellion lived a story more powerful than any movie he ever made. A story of a man who chose to fight, to live and to lead, until the very end. He was always larger than life, on stage, on screen, and even in the quietest rooms. But when Patrick was found curled up in his trailer, trembling and drenched in sweat, something shifted. The man known for exuding effortless charm and command now sat silently, whispering just one request: "Just hold my hand." He wasn't pleading for a miracle. He didn't need a savior. He just needed someone, anyone, to sit with him in the silence, without expectation, without the spotlight. This wasn't the Patrick Swayze that fans remembered from Dirty Dancing or Ghost. This was the man stripped of celebrity, clinging to humanity. That moment became a quiet breaking point, the start of an unraveling he could no longer conceal. And as filming ended, the real battle began. One that didn't roll credits or fade to black. The disease, now more ruthless, refused to wait in the wings. With the cameras packed away and production wrapped, there was no more hiding behind makeup or lighting. Patrick's condition worsened visibly. In January 2009, he was rushed to Cedars-Sinai after a severe bout of pneumonia. For someone healthy, it might have meant rest and recovery. But for Patrick, already ravaged by chemo, it was a life-threatening hit. Suddenly, the battle he tried so hard to fight privately was blasted across tabloids. Photos surfaced. Patrick looking frail, his face hollow, an oxygen tube clipped beneath his nose. The illusion of strength was gone. And yet, in the middle of this harsh reality, Patrick remained a fighter. As his lungs weakened and walking left him winded, he still insisted on discussing the future. "What's next?" he asked. Giving up was never in his script. That relentless drive led to a daring decision. Doctors suggested an aggressive, largely untested combo: Abraxane and GMSAR, high risk, high side effects. Still, Patrick didn't flinch. He agreed without hesitation. What followed was devastating. His hair, once part of his iconic look, began falling out in clumps. And though it might seem minor for Patrick, it was like losing part of his armor. Publicly, he wore wigs. Privately, he tried not to flinch when he looked in the mirror. His body transformed. Weight plummeted, skin faded, and simple tasks became marathons. But still, he pressed forward. He watched films, shared stories, and even rode horses when his body allowed. Sometimes it didn't. His speech slowed, his gaze drifted, his energy flickered like a candle nearing its end. It was no longer just the pancreas. The disease had spread, his entire body becoming a war zone he could no longer defend. And so, he made a final choice. He went home, not to surrender, but to find peace. In April 2009, Patrick and Lisa left Los Angeles behind and returned to their beloved California ranch. It was a place untouched by scripts or surgeons, a place where time moved slower and the air felt lighter. For Patrick, home was never just a location. It was a lifeline. Long rides through the pasture, sunsets on the porch, the soft thud of hooves in the dirt. Those quiet rituals grounded him, but even the simplest joys became hard-won. His body, once chiseled and agile, had become weak, unfamiliar. Climbing onto a horse was now a struggle. Sometimes he just leaned on the fence and watched. Still present, still trying. Lisa took on everything. Nurse, caretaker, partner. She managed the house, prepared his meals, kept track of meds, and stood vigil through sleepless nights. And though she saw the man she loved slowly vanish before her, she never let him feel like he was fading. Patrick wore his wig when visitors came, smiled for photos, and cracked his signature dry jokes, even when he could barely stay upright. But the cameras didn't stay away for long. Paparazzi lurked near the ranch, waiting for that vulnerable moment. Eventually, they got it. A photo of Patrick, gaunt and ghost-like, walking with Lisa. The headlines screamed the worst, wasting away. But what they missed were the truths behind the lens, the whispered I love yous, the late-night laughs, the simple joy of standing on his own. By August, the tide was turning fast. Fevers spiked, tremors worsened, and his strength drained like water slipping through fingers. Then came the collapse, his body spiraling into critical territory. Hypercalcemia, hyponatremia, gastrointestinal bleeding. His immune system had all but shut down. At Cedars-Sinai once more, the doctors said what no one wants to hear. There's nothing more we can do. So Patrick went home one last time. The quiet was heavy, the home still. His pain now beyond morphine's reach. Lisa gave every ounce of herself, adjusting doses, holding his hand, staying beside him as his world dimmed. Patrick, always defiant, resisted sedation as long as he could. He wanted to be present, even in agony. Then came a flicker of light. On September 11th, Lisa's brother and sister-in-law came to visit. Patrick, slipping in and out, found one last moment of clarity. He looked at Lisa, and with a whisper that barely crossed his lips said, "I love you." She replied softly, "I love you too." They didn't know then it would be their last exchange, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Over the next 48 hours, Patrick slipped into a coma, each breath shallower than the last, until at 10 a.m. on September 14th, Lisa noticed the stillness. A long inhale, then nothing. Donnie raced in, hoping for a miracle. But it was over. Patrick was gone. Quietly, gently, with Lisa by his side, just as he had asked for all along. And though the world mourned, it couldn't stop what came next. Whispers became headlines. Accusations bubbled from the shadows. Tabloids hurled ugly claims that Lisa had mistreated him, that she controlled his final days. The woman who had stayed up every night, who held his hand through pain and silence, was now on trial in the court of public opinion. But those who truly knew Patrick, who had stood by both of them through every agonizing step, knew the truth. Loyalty like Lisa's doesn't always make headlines, but in Patrick's final chapter, it was the most powerful force of all. When independent specialists like Dr. Richard Hunter took a deep dive into Patrick's medical files, the narrative shifted dramatically. The details painted a picture of meticulous care, not neglect. Each spike in pain was met with swift medical attention. Complications weren't brushed off. They were addressed with precision. The records showed follow-ups, timely interventions, and unwavering consistency. Dr. Hunter even publicly stated there was zero indication of mistreatment. In fact, he credited Patrick's survival, nearly 20 months beyond a stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnosis, to the extraordinary, hands-on care Lisa gave him daily. She wasn't just present, she was relentless in her devotion. Friends who witnessed those last months called her his warrior angel. She managed medications like a professional, cooked every meal, handled appointments, and stayed up night after night when Patrick's pain wouldn't let him rest. But despite the truth written in medical records, and in the hearts of those closest to him, the public can be louder than facts. Gossip often finds a stage when silence follows loss. Still, the people who mattered, Patrick's inner circle, his medical team, lifelong friends, even co-stars, never wavered. Their message was unified. Patrick's final chapter was wrapped in love, not betrayal. There's something hauntingly powerful about how Patrick defied the odds. Diagnosed with a condition so aggressive that most people don't live beyond a few months, he lasted 20. And it wasn't luck, it was layered. Part of it was his body, trained, toned, and built through years of dance and discipline. Patrick's body wasn't just strong, it was prepared. As a lifelong athlete, he had the heart and resilience most patients don't bring into a fight like this. Doctors said his strength allowed him to endure chemo sessions that would have crippled others. But physical strength was just one piece of the puzzle. Patrick had access to a level of care few could match. He tapped into the best of Stanford's experimental treatments, joining the Vatilanib trial ahead of the curve, getting early access to drug combinations like GM-SAR and Absane. These weren't just generic therapies. They were cutting-edge medical options that most could only dream of. But even that wasn't the secret weapon. What truly prolonged his life was his mindset. He didn't surrender to the diagnosis. He showed up, for life, for work, for Lisa, for hope. This refusal to fade quietly became a kind of fuel for everyone around him. Nurses, doctors, friends, they all noticed it. It was as if he knew every extra day mattered, and he made each one count. His story wasn't about denying death. It was about refusing to stop living. Every time someone expected him to disappear, Patrick came back, on set, at home, in spirit. And while many remember Patrick for his iconic roles, the dreamy dance instructor from Dirty Dancing, the intense spirit lover from Ghost, the fearless surfer in Point Break, those roles were only reflections of the man behind them. The real Patrick was far more layered. Behind the spotlight, he faced deeply personal struggles that never made tabloid headlines. In the late 90s, he quietly entered rehab, confronting addiction without the usual Hollywood spectacle. He didn't make excuses. He just put in the work. There were moments he stumbled, but each time he moved forward. The world never really saw how hard he fought behind the scenes. There were personal losses, too, ones he rarely spoke of. His father's sudden passing in 1982 left a hole that never quite healed. And when he and Lisa suffered a heartbreaking miscarriage, it left scars that time couldn't erase. These moments didn't make magazine covers, but they shaped his soul. They made him softer, more reflective. And that spirit, the kind that still shines through interviews and old footage, is what made Patrick unforgettable. So when we think about Patrick today, we don't just remember the movie star. We remember the fighter, the husband, the friend, the man who turned every day into a miracle. And maybe that's the real lesson he left us with. Not just how to live, but how to leave with grace. What's your most unforgettable Patrick moment? Let us know in the comments, and until next time, keep his light alive.